So congratulations if you've made it till this point. This is already a big commitment. So now we can finally pose our character to be able to make a nice capture of it or a nice render and showcase it to your friend or customers. I will first separate the katanas, the sword and the knife so that I will be able to place them in the belt. So you just need to go into edit mode, select their vertices and press the P key to separate them. Once done, I will try to put them into position. So honestly, I don't have specific advices here. The only thing I will do first is to reset their origin. So I will go into edit mode, select a loop where I want to set the origin, snap the cursor, and then you can right click on the object and click the set origin to 3D cursor, or go into object, set origin to 3D cursor. Once you're done with this, try to find a few references or follow the model that is already provided and place both the knife and the little sword inside the belt. Regarding the katana, I'm placing it in the end, but I will first move the whole body of the character to get a nice pose before I really set up a position for the sword. There are different ways we can use then to pose our character. We can use the shape keys as we did for the mouth position. So in the end we'll be using shape keys to create some facial expression. But honestly, to pose the character, it's not that handy because you have to select some area, then place the 3D cursor, create set it as a pivot point, use the proportional editing so that everything is following and moving along. So it's a bit tedious, and honestly you won't have super nice result, or you will have to spend a lot of time to get to nice result, and it's not super intuitive, especially if you're not a professional of posing a character. That's going to be pretty complicated. I knew what kind of pose I wanted, but honestly this method is really not good for this kind of thing. So to pose the face it's okay, but to pose a whole character, that's going to be really tedious, as you can see. What we can do instead is to use a rig. So we won't be creating a war rig, but we can load one that is already made. To do so, we'll go into Preference, Add-on, type Rig, and use the Rigify add-on. Then in the 3D view we can press Shift A, go to Armature, Basic, and use the basic Human Meta Rig. If you use the Human Meta Rig, the original, you will have the whole face controller, but that's a bit overkill to do what we have to do now. So I will simply scale the model so that it better fit my character. Then I will go into edit mode, enable the X mirror for the editing, and move each bone so that they follow and are aligned with the feature of my character. So to go into edit mode, it's like for a 3D model, you just have to press the tab key. If we were to be creating or generating a real rig from this add-on, I would have given you a lot of advices first, because there are stuff we can't do, but here we just use the existing armature to parent our character directly to it. So just edit it, try to match the anatomy of your character, and then get out of edit mode and apply the rotation and scale to the armature, so that we won't have any weird behavior once we will parent our character to the rig. Once I'm done positioning every single bone, try not to forget to extrude some fingers for your character. So I advise you to create the palm bones and a bone per knuckle. That will really help with the automatic weight. And then we'll get out of edit mode, select our character and parent it to the armature. So to make the armature driving our character, we need to first select the character, then the armature, press Ctrl P and choose with automatic weight. This way Blender will create a vertex group per bone for our character that will influence its deformation. When you enter pose mode, you are able to rotate the different bone or even move them, and your character should follow. So I have to edit a bit the vertex group, so I won't be doing a big weight painting. I will just fix some of the issues here. In the overlay option, I will enable the show weight option and activate the zero weight, so that when I will shuffle into the different vertex group, I will see all their influences. So the same bone should not be influencing our leg plates nor the belt, so I will just select it and click remove. And I will repeat this process for any part that is incorrectly influenced. Regarding the head and its features such as the teeth, gum, etc., I will all set them with a full influence from the head bone, so that I'm sure that they won't be offset whenever I will move or rotate the head bone. Once everything is fixed, I will switch the armature display to stick, so that those bones won't be covering my character that much, and I will try to create a badass pose. So we are pretty limited because the rig is not done, so we don't have IK for the legs, for example, which is very handy when you want to offset the pelvis and the legs to put weight onto one of the legs. So just try to get something that looks more or less believable and try to get some nice silhouette with your character. Once I will be done with posing the character, I will create a new shape key, and using the sculpt tool or the edit mode, I will be able to reshape a bit some areas of the body and also give him a facial expression. From there, you will be able to set up your camera, as we already created some lighting and camera rig, place correctly the sword and the katana, and make a render. Then a bit of post-production in Photoshop will surely help selling the mood of your character, so don't hesitate to make a few render and share them onto Twitter, for example. I will be so happy to see the final result you get following this course. I really hope you've enjoyed it, and I promise I'll get back with new videos on YouTube and new courses very soon. Thank you. Since I wanted to recreate the previous character from the Dragon Knight, I am using the same reference as on my previous course. So first thing is to place the eyes right in the middle of the skull. Then I will carve around the nose area so that I will get the facial part of the cheekbone. Then I will add some material on the side of the cheekbone. So don't forget to rotate as often as possible around your character so that you get things right, especially backing the eye sockets. Then I will add a few strokes, and the idea here is to place the main landmark of the skull. So you have the cheekbones, you have the eye socket, you have the area of the nose. Note that this character has a larger nose than a human being. And here I'm adding some clay to the mouth to create some sort of cylinder shape or a barrel. Just imagine that your teeth are shaping a barrel, a cylinder. It's not flat. And generally people tend to draw the mouth as I'm doing here, using the Dame Standard brush, but they do it on a flat surface. And this is a big mistake because your lips are projected in a way onto your teeth that are making this barrel shape. So it's very important to shape it. And even if here I still have this kind of alien look, the fact that I have given a bit of geometry to the mouth, giving it this barrel shape, this will greatly help me later on. So as for the body, I'm trying to create the base landmark of the head, the different flattened area, etc. Adding the eyeball early on will help you creating a more convincing face. So you should have the room for one eye between those two eyes. We say like there is a third eye in the middle of the face. So I tend to make the eyes too big generally on my characters. So this time I force myself not to make it too big. We also need to slightly rotate the eyes outward so that we won't have this cross-eyed effect. Your eyes are not perfectly aligned, they have like 5 or 6 degrees angle toward the outside of the face. When we dug the hole for the eye socket, we have dug the skull shape. But then you need to add flesh like this to make the eyelashes. This is very important because when I was a younger artist, I tend to forget about it, and I think it's kind of my anime culture that pushed me to forget to put the flesh and the muscles around the eyes. So you will have a better looking and a more accurate eye for sure. Then I'm fleshing the lips. So the thing is that the lower lip is mainly made of 2 muscles, while the upper lip is made of 3 muscles. And don't forget to add clay, don't remove it. Again, the mouth is not something that is carved in the skull, it's popping out. It's flesh upon teeth, so it's important to get it right. So as usual, try to find as much references as possible and also check out for anatomy references, meaning that anatomy for artists, where they are explaining you how to shape the muscles, how to shape the different landmarks. Like here I will be extruding the ear, so they are between the eyes and the nose line. So I'm just masking them and then use the move tool to extrude. When I will update the Dynamesh, this will automatically remesh the character. So I will have this kind of ear socket that will be ready. So I'm trying to refine the shape of my of the face as usual. Don't forget to watch the reference that are provided of the character, because I oftenly work too much on my character without watching the current reference. That will bring me to get maybe a result that I'm happy with, but that won't look like the current reference. Then I like to use the flatten or polish brush to create the flat area of the face. First of all, I think it's very important to make your shape more readable, and also regarding the style, this is something I really enjoy. This is something you see a lot in the Overwatch style character, where some of the area are very flattened, very crisp, let's say, while other areas are very smooth. The thing is that if you want to make something stylized with somehow this cartoony style, you have to smooth a lot and get very clean surfaces. And I generally tend to add too much detail too soon, because this is something that you will feel more confident adding detail than working on big chunk, because you are over focused and you're doing something pleasant. But this is not the right way to work. You should always try to make the main proportion to work. So here you can see that I'm slowly getting something that is closer to the reference, but by adding those little detail, my character look way older than what it should. So now you can see that I'm really moving bigger chunk, and it really changed the way the character is looking. And this is what I'm saying, this is what is important. I should have done this before adding those details. So later on I will smooth most of the wrinkles I have laid out, but those in my case really help me to read the shape of the skull of my character. So it clearly needs to be slightly elongated, but for a first pass I feel like the head is not that bad. Then I will slightly rework the hair, give them a more geometrical shape. So watch out the reference to see how the cartilage is flowing, where is the hole, what's upon it, what's in the back of it. And in the end of this video I will be adding a cube and mirror it to create the horn, and use the snake hook brush, which is some kind of move brush but with the possibility to extrude geometry. So it's pretty simple. You can even use directly the move brush to extrude the horn, and then just dynamesh your character. So I will just speed up the video for the end, and I will see you on the next one. We can now start the long process of UV unwrapping our character so that we can bake the textures. The first thing you have to do in Blender is to create a new texture. So I will go to the UV image editor, click on new, create a 4K texture using the UV grid so that we have this checkboard pattern that will help you checking the quality of our UVs. To hold the texture, we need to create a new material, so I will press the new button in the material tab, give it a name like Baker, and then in the node editor, if you have the node wrangler add-on enabled, pressing Ctrl T will generate a texture node, or you can press Shift A, texture, image texture, and add a new slot, and then load from your library the Baker texture. I can now set up my workspace by opening the UV image editor in place of the shader editor, and then I will switch to loop dev, select the lower part, and press unwrap on the cloth. As it is a simple plain base, it will be unwrapped very easily, and we will be able to see the checkboard pattern appearing on our character. For the rest of the body, you can see that it looks like a full gray. This is because as Blender can't unwrap it, it will put all the vertices in the bottom left corner, and so they will source all the same color from one pixel. If you have missed it, I've applied the mirror modifier because as our eye poly model is not symmetrical, I won't be able to bake the same texture for both sides. I will then start putting my seams on the easiest part, such as the katana and the sword. So currently we'll just have to slice it on one side and remove each cap, so each end of the object. So I can mark seams on each side, then select one of the length and add a new seam, and this will unwrap as clean as possible for sure. On some of my previous tutorials or even on other party tutorials, you may have seen the use of texture atlas to be able to combine different objects on the same texture space. It's now not necessary to use this kind of add-on or method, since we can go into edit mode on multiple objects at once in Blender 2.8. So this is a very nice improve for UV mapping. For the time being, I'm just unwrapping each piece one by one, and then when we will combine them on the same UVs, this new feature will be so powerful. Since Blender 2.8 is still in development while I'm recording this tutorial, there might be some improve in the UI, but honestly UV unwrapping haven't evolved that much for years, so I don't think that other than some new tools that might help, the method will change a lot. And if you use any other software, you'll see that it's always the same method. The important thing, as usual, is not the tool but the output. One of the main rules regarding UVs is that you will try to place your seams and hide them, so trying to assign them inside creases, for example, or on unexposed edges. Sometimes we don't have the choice like for this blade. And also we want to limit as much possible the number of seams to have as less possible UV island. The fact that you unwrap your mesh without creating a bunch of islands will avoid to have some difference in the shading, and it will make your life easier. So the first step will be to create all the UV islands, and then in the second part we'll be optimizing all those islands to have great UVs. So I will speed up the video because there is nothing that much to explain on the video. But before, we'll have a short look to our model where I've placed all the seam, and you will be able to find this reference in the available files. So here you can see the fully unwrapped character, and I guess this is the version available in your file because it's the version 3 UVs. So you can open it in a new instance of Blender so that you can compare it with your character. So we'll just have a look here at the different seams. So as I told you before, here for the blade, I've put only one seam in the back so that in the front here the edge of the blade is still connected, and here you can see that I have only one UV island for the blade. Regarding the character, in this case the upper and the lower part are still separated. So we'll go first with the upper part. So as you can see, I'm first following the different items or different features of the character. So I've cut it whenever we have a big change in the material, like cloth and body, because we'll be able to hide the seams in this crease. And since we have since the material from skin to clothes will be changing, if we have a slight difference of shading, it won't be as noticeable as on the skin. Then I've cut under the arms following the chest so that it's hidden as much as possible here, and we need to separate the arms, so the easiest way is to cut here, and this is one of the parts that might be a problem for us later on. Then as for the inside of the body here, I cut inside the arm because this should be also an area of the body that won't be seen that much. Then you have to separate the end, so I've been trying to follow the bandage here and here also. Same as for the clothes. This will allow us to have a separation in both the material and the UVs. For the end, it's very simple. If you remember well, when we've made the retopology, I've insisted on the fact that we have to have a line that follows the side or the edge of the end. And this loop is the one that we have selected and marked as seam to unwrap our character here. Then for the belt here, you can see that it's pretty simple, again separating per material more or less, and then try to think the different part as boxes. So you always need to remove the cap, and in most cases, if you can, just cut one edge and then fight with the UVs to make them look good. For the tongue, same thing, it's separated, cut on one side, and then I remove or unwrapped the cap. The leg plates, we have a big advantage here is that this inside part will be mostly hidden, even if we are going to animate it or rig it later on. We can cut the inside edge here. Finally, for the face, regarding the size of our character, we know that the face won't be that much animated. So we can select a loop inside the mouth, separate the head by cutting the neck here, and then trying to follow in the back the ears, separating the horns for sure, and trying to cut as much into the scalp as possible. You can see also here the back of the ears, how they have been cutted here. This part doesn't have any seams because it's a simple plane. It's the same for both clothes in the back. Then I have here the pants that is separated in two pieces, cut on the inside and on the outside here. and separated where the socks will start. Again, we have a new material here, so we should be able to separate them. The inside of the back legs and the calf was a bit trickier. So again, I'm trying to hide the seam in a crease here. Again, we have different material for the shin guard and those parts. And then we have to separate the feet here. So it will be an horizontal cut, again, trying to hide it. Then we need a vertical cut so that we can unwrap the foot like this, and it's also cut near, so we can't really see it here, but it's also cut in the inside to separate it from the flip-flap. And then for the flip-flap, I've just made a few additional cuts here to relax the mesh. The front knee part of the shin guard are separated. I was able to separate them because as the crease is pretty strong here, we won't be seeing a big difference in the shading here. So you can separate them and then cut the back as if it was two different pieces here. And it's the same on both sides. Placing all those seams and unwrapping on the fly your character is not a big deal. This should take you like an hour or so. So I will let you with a time lapse where I'm just placing my seams and wrapping my character step by step. And if I don't see any big stretching, that's gonna be okay for me. Then on the next video we'll start refining the UVs. If you have big distortion or big difference of resolution, meaning that the checkboard pattern is getting buggy onto the surface of your character, or it's getting uneven, it's probably because you have forgotten one seam or so. Sometime in the creases or where the geometry is a bit more complex, we tend to forget to mark an edge as seam, and so it won't be cut, and Blender will have some difficulties to properly unwrap the model. So this will happen whatever the type of software you are using to make your UVs. So I will let you with a time lapse for the end of this video, because we have seen most of the seams. You have the reference file and you can follow this video if you need a more detailed placement for your seams. Before we start detailing the type light, we need to fix some problem. It lacks of geometry. So if we subdivide it, the different plates level will look very smooth and around it. So we need to add some loop cuts. To do so, we'll simply use the Z-Modeler tool, which by default will create loop cuts. So I will add supporting loop cuts around the edges of those plates. I have for sure I have enabled symmetry before doing this, so both type plates are being modified. And once I'm done, I will simply press the Ctrl D key to subdivide my model, because I believe the topology is decent here. So once I've divided it like 3 times, I will simply delete the lower levels of subdivision, because I don't need it to be like super low poly by default, because we won't be deforming it, like moving the different parts like we will do for a arm, a leg, or any part of the body. Here it's a hard surface object, so we'll mostly rescale it or change its orientation, but we won't need to use the move brush that much. Then it will be mostly a work of surfacing upon it. So I will use a bit of the flatten brush just to redefine those surfaces, and then we'll go into detailing this mesh. The fact that we are making a stylus character, we don't need to make super complex shape. Having pure shapes like this will really help reading. Another thing is that you need to be able to read the character from afar whenever we are seeing it in full size, because it's a game character. We are aiming for a mid poly to low poly style, so we need it to be readable from afar. Creating very small details and variation in shape may not be super relevant. Then from there we will start working on this cloud pattern on the different plates. The method in theory is pretty simple. We'll use the mask brush to draw somehow the pattern, and then we will extrude this. So the first thing I've done is that, holding Control, I've set the hardness of my masking brush to minus 100%. Whenever you hold Control, you will see the hardness value appearing here. So hold Control and move it to minus 100% so that you will get very hard border and very defined shapes. Don't hesitate to subdivide again your model if you feel like it's not defined enough. Here, for example, you can see that it is still pixelated, so I've subdivided once and I will restart creating those round shapes. To create nice looking cloud, you can see that I'm using like 3 or 4 different sizes of circle and try to lay them as random as possible, but I'm trying to respect a diagonal or something that is easy to read for the main shape. Then I will unmask areas using some kind of spiral shapes. So the most important thing here is to use always the same size of brush to get a consistent line width. So I believe for the whole character I've been using a brush size between 7 and 9. So it depends on the different parts, but it mostly depends on the scale of your character when you've started working in ZBrush. So if you're doing this over multiple sessions, don't forget to write down the size of your brush somewhere so that you won't forget it. So I will be continuing on masking those different areas, then mask the upper part also of the mesh. Once you're happy with the result, just invert the mask by pressing Ctrl I, and then we'll go to the deformation panel and use the inflate option. Again, in my case, it's written in French, but it should be at the same spot in the deformation tab in your case too. I will just give some thickness to it, so I've been testing different deformation filter and the inflate was the best. To make the clouds more interesting, I wanted to bevel them. So in the first place, I was using the scissor brush because I was thinking that it might get to the right results just in one stroke. But later on, I figured that using a combination of the standard brush and the pinch brush would work betterly and would be easier to handle. There's not only one way to do things, there are always multiple ways to do things, so you have to find your method. Just think of what you are aiming for. So here I want a bevel with a sharp edge falling down to the inside of the clouds. This will give more relief to what I'm doing. Then I will be using the orb flatten brush to give it this chiseled and hammered metal shape that I was aiming for. Since the process is pretty repetitive, I will just let you with a time lapse now. The only thing is that once I've done detailing each cloud here, I will disable the symmetry and create large slash into the metal using the orb slash brush. So you can find it in the orb brushes pack that I've invited you to download. So I will make pretty large slash. Try avoiding creating small scratches everywhere. In my case, I've made big scratches because if you go into small details, the surface will be very busy and it won't be as readable as before. Plus, since our character body is pretty simple in the shapes, if you make very busy areas on the armor while the body is very simple, you will lose balance in the detail level of your character and readability. Since we are using only one texture set inside of Substance Painter, to separate the different type of material like metal, cloth and skin, I will be using ID maps. So an ID map is simply a set of solid color combined into one picture that will allow us to separate the different parts using color selection. Since we have created a lot of different fusion masks inside of Photoshop, I can simply control-click those masks so it will create an automatic selection, and then in a new layer I'm just filling it with a solid color. So each time I create a new color, I slightly offset its hue so that we will have a large range of color, and it will make the selection easier and the tolerance won't be altered while we are selecting inside of Substance Painter. Once saved, I've loaded it inside of Substance Painter and I can drag and drop it into the ID stack. You could use it as a simple fill layer, but the fact that we add it into the ID stack will make Substance Painter recognize it automatically when we will use, for example, an ID filter. That's why it's better to use those stacks. But sometimes I use some of the stack with other texture just so that they are saved. But since it also drives some of the filters and automatic material from Substance, it's better to set your texture in the right stack. I generally never use Substance materials. I generally generate them by myself by painting the different channel, but for the skin here we can use one of the basic materials, so the basic skin. I've previously created a skin folder and I'm just dropping this material inside of this skin folder. Most of the basic material are just a combination of basic layers and filter that are using the different baked texture we have imported. Since I wasn't happy with it, I've switched to a smart material and used the skin human as a base. So you simply have to take the material and drag and drop it inside the folder. It should take a few seconds to compute and then you will see the result. If your computer is suffering from the resolution of your character, you can work in 2K resolution by changing the resolution setting inside the texture setting. You can then export in 4K, it's not a problem. Substance Painter will extrapolate the resolution and you won't lose any details. That's one of the big strengths of Substance Painter. And at some point during the project, I've switched to a 2K resolution just to make my painting smoother. So it took me a while before I find where I could set the size of the skin pores, because here they were way too big. So it's in the surface skin, and these details are driven by the fusion mask. So you will find the fill layers into the fusion mask, and as you increase the scale on the UVs, the details will get smaller and smaller. Then I will also highly reduce the strength of the 8 map to something very subtle, because since I want my character to be stylized, I don't want to have a very noisy skin. It's just to bring slightly more detail when getting close to the character. I'm also checking the different fill layers to see what kind of influence they have, and if I feel like they are not useful for me, I will just get rid of them by deleting those. So I got rid, for example, of black dots layer that wasn't useful for me. I'm also getting rid of all the small details layer, like the small veins and stuff like this, because honestly this is not what I want for my character. I want it to have a simple shader, and also since it won't be super high definition because it's pretty low poly, we are not supposed to zoom that much on it, and I don't want to get too realistic, so I will get rid of most of the detail layers, and then we can drag and drop our color map inside the main color fill layer. I've also got rid of the ambient occlusion layer that was darkening the skin, because since we have used already the ambient occlusion inside of Photoshop, that will bring too much contrast inside the diffuse color of our character. So for this smart material, I've only kept the base noise and the base fill layer. Then to separate this layer from the whole body and set it as being the skin, I will add a black mask by right clicking on the folder, and then set a filter, color selection. By default it will load the ID mask, and then you can pick a color, the green one, which is for our skin, and it will automatically create a fusion mask based on this color selection. Then you can play with the hardness and the tolerance to expand or shrink the mask. I will then repeat the process with other smart materials such as the steel. So I'm mostly using smart materials because they are easy to customize and easy to clean up. Sometimes you don't need every single option and layer available in it, and since those materials are created inside of Substance Painter, they are subdivided into classic layers. One thing I've explained in my game asset creation tutorials that is available on YouTube when I've created the tree is that you can easily create your own smart material by creating a folder once you're happy with the result. Put every involved layer into it, right click on the folder and click the option create smart material. It will create automatically a smart material with the name of the folder you've created. So just think of giving a relevant name to your folder. This is a method I use a lot for game assets, especially on our game Noara, since I'm making a lot of stones, trees and stuff like this. This allows me to keep a consistency in the color setup for a specific asset. So I'm using different smart material for the different part. I won't be multiplying them like using a tons of material. I think in the end I had two different metal, and I've made a pass of painting upon it to get rid of some of the high frequency detail to make my character more readable. So try not to put too much things. I know it's really temptable because it always look fancy, but think to read your character from afar. And one of the latest pass I made was to simplify my character. Using the C shortcut and the M shortcut, you can switch between the different channel of your material, such as the albedo, roughness, metalness, etc., and get back to the material view. After different tests for the fabric material, I've simply created a fill layer and used one of the procedural textures that I've dropped into the 8th of the layer. You can also drop the texture inside the roughness channel, for example, and then you have to go to the layer mapping and really increase at the UV scale so that you see the pattern. So there are tons of seamless texture available by default inside of Substance Painter. I generally don't use custom textures. I just use the one available. You can do a lot already with this. I'm not saying this is not important to create your own one or to create your own material with Substance Designer, for example, but you can achieve a lot already with what is available by default. I can now add a filter level that will drive the roughness, so you have to specify it inside the filter. Select roughness, and I will play with the contrast and the lightness of it to reduce the roughness, or increase it, sorry, to make way smoother reflection onto the cloth. So I generally use the specular workflow because I feel like you have more control on both the quality of the reflection, whether it's rough or very sharp, and also its intensity and its color, which may sound weird because this is wrong, this is not physically correct, but whenever you are working on stylus character, for example, it's great to have this kind of control. I've seen some of the textures of Heroes of the Storm character, and they use a specular workflow so that they input a bit of color into the reflection of their character to boost out their saturation and make them look a little more cartoony or so. While with the metalness and roughness workflow, you don't have the control on the color of the reflection. There will be metallic or not metallic, and whenever it's metallic, the color you've input will influence the color of the reflection, while whenever you're using a dielectric material, so something that is not metallic, the reflections are generally white, and the intensity of those reflections is 100% based on the roughness of the material. So all of this, I don't know the mathematical formulas, but all of this is automatically dealt by Substance Painter and by all the PBR engines available. So we just have to set up the right roughness to get the right specularity or shininess of our character here. So in the end of this video, I will slightly tweak the different roughness value, the different noise pattern upon the different materials, and also make some color correction inside of Photoshop because some of the area were not correctly drawn, so I had to correct the painting and also the ID map and make some fine tweak. So I will just leave you with a short time lapse here, and in the next video we'll start painting onto our character. I'm adding the ends as we did before by simply inserting a new sphere, and then I will insert a cone shape. So once I've shaped the end, I will add those finger parts. So as I did before, I will use the Control and Move tool to duplicate them by holding Control and moving. This will create the different parts of the knuckles, and then I will give an orientation to my finger. So little mistake here regarding proportion. It's not that important because I will be correcting it during the sculpting, but the first knuckle from the root of the end till the first joint should be the same length as both next knuckles combined. So just remind this. But as we are inputting the knuckles directly inside the hand, it's hard to figure out where is the joint between the first knuckle and the end. So I'm doing the same thing for the thumb here. You can see that I have activated the poly frame on the right here. And this is why my mesh has different colors. It allows you to display the wireframe, but also the poly groups. So we'll talk about the poly group later on as we will be using them. But those are, let's say, mesh group or polygons groups that are automatically generated by ZBrush. You can also generate them yourself, and this will really help us to mask certain area of the mesh while we are sculpting. So those are pretty important. Note that when you hold Alt and make a quick click, even a right or a left click onto a subtool, it will be automatically selected so that you won't need to go into the subtool panel to go from one to the other. For the end, I'm also using the mirror and weld tool to make sure that my left end is the same as the right end. And don't forget to press X to activate the mirroring whenever you are using the move tool, so that both ends are mirrored and moved the same way. So you can see that I'm trying to break the wrist and the end to get this stepped shaped. It's pretty important, so I'm emphasizing here because this is something that is pretty subtle, but in the beginning when you are roughing the shape, I feel like you may exaggerate them so that it will be easier for you not to forget to do it. There are different landmarks that we should take care of pretty soon. This wrist shape in the beginning. Then you have the flow of the muscle of the forearm. So you see that the wrist is pretty thin, and then you have this nice bulby shape. Then you have the biceps that should be straight, don't make it round. And look at how the shoulder is inserted between the biceps and the triceps. Then we have the biceps that goes within the arm, they are inserted into the arm. Then you have this kind of Y shape of the pelvis and the muscle, which is very important. See those three main muscles for the size, but also those muscles connected to the pelvis that will help your leg to rotate. See how the knees are falling inward while the ankles are raising inward. Just think of an angry face when you are placing those shapes. And you can see that the calf muscle are following this shape also. The inner are shorter, while the outer are longer but slightly higher. We'll go over the face later on. So this is not an anatomy course. You need to have reference, but hopefully those few landmarks will help you. So now we can merge all the subtools together to avoid having like way too much subtools. And then I have dynameshed it, but clicking the group option here. This will preserve or keep my polygroups, avoiding the different parts of the body to be welded together, but also allowing me to select those different parts by Ctrl-Shift clicking them and reposition them with the move tool, etc. without any problem. So now I will go into a time lapse because I'm mainly shaping the body. So here you have to follow the reference I've provided you and try to find as much anatomy reference as possible. I'm using the clay buildup brush and I'm brushing my character following the muscle flow. So if you don't have any reference, that's gonna be pretty hard to guess. Never do the guesswork regarding anatomy or whatever you are doing. If you can't find any reference, even if it's a fantasy creature, just think of what kind of existing creature is close to it and always use a real reference to get closer to this. So as I told you before, while I'm pretty confident, let's say, with my muscle shapes, I know for sure, because I've been through those videos before, that my proportions are pretty off. So try to find the right proportion, the position of the elbow compared to the wrist, compared to the hips, the hand along the thigh, and all those kind of stuff. So even if I'm a bit detailing or roughing the shape of the muscles, that's the way I generally work. Is that I'm, as I told you, I'm not super used to characters that much. So I need to have more landmark than an experienced character artist or a specialist that will automatically, even with a very low detailed character silhouette, will be able to deal with the proportions. So if you have the same problem as me, don't go too much into detail, but shape the muscles as well as possible, following references, and then we will use the grab brush and the moving tools to and the move brush, sorry, to refine everything. And you will see that I will double the size of the leg, double the size of the torso in length, because here is way too short. Reduce the arm. You can see that they are, for me now, that's really obvious, while it wasn't while I was working on it, but now it's really obvious. We will revise the size of the arm, make the hands maybe twice smaller than the actual vision we have. So another thing is, don't hesitate to show your work to other people, because as we are over focused on what we are doing, this is where you tend to have a blurred vision of what you are doing. You can't see the mistakes you're doing anymore. The other thing is that I've made this course during my work time, for sure. So I was working like 1 or 2 hours a day every morning, very early. If you can do it, I mean, if you have time in your day to train, I think working like 2 hours a day might be better than working 8 hours in one day and then just don't work for 3 or 4 days. Because when you come back with fresh eyes, you will mostly see the different problem you've created or you haven't seen before. Also, you will be more motivated to rework details, because I think one of the field where I've made the most progress those last 2 years is that now I know that sometimes you have to rework everything from scratch or destroy what you have done. Even if you liked it, if it's wrong, don't get too attached to what you are doing. If a better artist, such as Spoon in my case, which is very good in anatomy, come to you and say, okay, that's great, but there are a lot of mistakes and you should rework this and that, come to you, then it's easier to get rid of things and restart when you've spent like few hours every day than when you have worked like 8 hours in a row and then someone told you, okay, that's really shitty, you should restart it from scratch. So yeah, it will happen and you should keep this in mind. And even if you complete this course once and you are not that happy with the result, just do it again. The other thing you need to know is that 90% of the work on this character is from the sculpting. If you have a bad sculpt, adding the textures, etc. won't save the day. In the second part, we can have a look at some of the trickiest parts of the unwrapping. So for the pant, I've decided to align it in a square shape. So the idea was to make both legs parallel. So you need to align each side seam you have cut and then redistribute the point on the top part to unstretch the mesh. I'm using the 3D cursor as a pivot point, and now I can align the inside of the leg. So there will be some pinning work for sure, but also some work to align the different parts. So the idea is to help me using some intermediate unwrapping and then checking the model. So you can see that on the top part I have some distortion, and by moving the different points on the top I should be able to unstretch a bit my mesh. It's the same for the lower part. I'm trying to see if there is any weird square shape. So you can't avoid to have this kind of distortion everywhere because we are unwrapping it in a position that is not optimized, while Blender generally automatically optimize your mesh when you do a regular unwrapping. So here I'm just trying to redistribute it, and then I reselection the whole points and press unwrap again, so that the inside of the mesh is reprojected based on the pin part. Same process for the second pant UV island. So I'm aligning the legs, then I will straighten each side and try to redistribute the point. One little enhancement that I haven't done and that maybe you could do is to try to align both sides of each island, one on each other, meaning that the side point of both front and back island of the pant should be aligned. This would allow you to first merge one side of the back and front island together, and also make sure that you will have a seamless texture. Honestly, I didn't thought of it while I was doing it, so that's quite of a mistake, and I ended up with a very good result because I believe that the approximation of my unwrap wasn't that bad. And plus, as we are going to use Substance Painter for the texture mapping, generally when you do it in a 3D space, you won't have this problem of seams that you may encounter whenever you're working directly in Photoshop, for example. So then I just have to unstretch some of the parts, making sure that I don't have overlapping UVs, and I should get pretty nice UV island for the pant that will be really easy to set up then, and that will be optimized to have and that will for sure be optimized for a good texel density. What I will do now is that I will jump directly to the hands and facial unwrapping, since the rest of the body is pretty classical. The arms and the legs can be dealt as if they were simple cylinders. So we will be working first on those hands so that I can explain you how I've made them, and then I will let you with a time lapse that will be starting wherever we have finished, just right here, so that you have the complete process in video. The hands unwrapping is a pretty tricky part. I want to have all the fingers aligned vertically, a bit as if they were boxed made. So it's quite as what we've done with the pant, but we'll have to do this for each finger. So I start by aligning them vertically without even looking at my 3D mesh and see if the texture is straightened, because it's pretty tricky. So I just arrange them the way I want, and then I will check how my UVs are reacting and start aligning sides. So I will do this on every finger, and then I will try to align the loops that are crossing the finger, because when we've modeled it, the finger were pretty basic, so I'm assuming that those loops should be perpendicular to the finger length. Then it's the same work of pinning and re-unwrapping, and then I will spend a lot of time redistributing the point of each knuckles, trying to even out the UVs by looking at my mesh and see if I get a squared checkboard. To do so, I'll select each knuckles and straighten them by moving groups of vertices. So this is, I think, one of the most relevant thing to show you how a good topology is important. And here you can see that having loops and, let's say, a clever topology will sure help for rigging and deformation, but it also helps for UV mapping. I will then repeat the process for the inside part of the ends, so it's exactly the same way, and then I will weld the thumb or the pinky together, meaning that I will have to align the vertices of the first island with the vertices of the second island wherever I've marked a seam on one side of the end. Then I will be able to weld those vertices and get rid of potential seams. All of these are small adjustments that will really improve the texel density and, I would say, the cleverness of your UVs. Plus those UV islands will be very easy to arrange with the other one, and so we'll have a very nice UV map for our character. This level of commitment for the UV unwrapping is not necessary. I've made all my previous character with simpler UVs or UVs that I've done way faster, but for this one I really want to push the UV quality and make the best UV as I can. So it's a matter for me to improve my skills in UV mapping, and then to be able to say that this is a good UV island, this is a good piece, I've optimized the texel density. So you may think that this is not as mandatory as before, because the technology now allows us to use very high definition textures, but in counterpart, new games fit more and more character, more and more assets. So you still need to optimize everything you're doing so that in one end it will have a better look for a given texture size, and also you'll be able to produce more character with less texture space used. I'm not assuming that what I'm showing you is the perfect way to do it, but just think of the method and just think of the output. If you were to choose between two character artists with the same level, you will probably choose the one that I've made the most clever and most optimized UVs. And this is what I would ask to any character artist that would work on my video game. So if you're taking this course to improve your level or to maybe one day work in the game industry, you should do it this way. The time frame to build the character with this level of detail and this complexity might be from 40 to 60 hours. Optimizing those UVs might be like 2 or 3 hours. What you will gain compared to the time spent is really valuable, so don't hesitate to optimize everything you're doing. And when we'll do the bake, we are going to use an handmade cage, and this will be exactly the same concept. I spent 1 hour more by optimizing what I'm doing, but I'm sure that the output will be better, that I will get a better result, and that this is a more professional way to do things. So I'm now speeding up the video because I will be moving each vertex in one by one, resizing the knuckles one by one, so that I can stretch my UVs and get more even pattern onto my character. And then I will be welding the vertices that you can already see are aligned, so nothing too fancy, nothing really new here. So we'll jump right to unwrapping the face so that I can explain you everything, and the next video will be a time lapse of the full unwrapping so that you can see all the steps. The head turns out to be not the worst piece and not the most complicated piece to be unwrapped. You will find the position of the different seams on the previous video that we have made. So by default the unwrapping was pretty good, but the thing that bothers me is that I've always had some issues with Blender to symmetrize what I'm doing when unwrapping. I found some content and some method to do it, but it wasn't that obvious for me and it didn't work that much. So as I don't want to explain something that I'm not comfortable with, I will explain you my method for this one. And some of you may have think of it, but the simplest way to create symmetry in Blender is to use the mirror modifier. So I will be working only on one part of the face, and since I've cut a seam around the neck to separate the head part from the rest of the body, I will simply separate the mesh entirely, then cut the face from the very middle, and I will work only on one side and use the mirror modifier. Once done, I will be able to apply the mirror modifier, rejoin the separated mesh to the neck part, and then using the old removable technique, I think now it's in object cleanup and merge by distance, because they have changed the UI lately in Blender 2.8. You should be able to merge the floating vertices and get back to what you had. So this is where I've started separating the head from the body, and I will be able to get rid of one half, create the mirror modifier, and work with one side of the mesh. So I will do this several times, applying the mirror modifier, re-welding the head, etc. The trick is to select the center loop, let's say, or the center line, and pin it so that it's vertically aligned, and whenever you will apply the mirror modifier, it will be easier for you to weld each point and avoid to have a seam appearing. Because I thought several times that I was done unwrapping the head, and then I see some stretching on the ear, on the cheek, or I don't know. So I revised the unwrapping of the head, remirrored it, and redo this welding pass. So I do believe there are methods and tools that are more efficient to do so, but this is just a trick to help you, and it works pretty well. Honestly, I didn't spend like hours working on the head. It's not a problem, but I do feel like this is not a proper workflow. This is not, I feel like it's a trick. It's not a consistent and clever workflow, I believe. So there must be another tool, and hopefully when this course come together, or when the 2.8 of Blender will be stable, there will be content showing how to unwrap properly things. But for the time being, you can use this method. And what I want to show is a clean UV map. It's not like use this tool or use this one. You have the general ID. I'm unstretching part of the face by using the proportional editing, because in this very version the UV sculpting was not available. But for sure, if I was able to use UV sculpt, where you can use the grab brush to move big chunk of the mesh, and you can use the relax to smooth out the UVs, it's way easier. Here I'm doing it by hand, by moving some vertices, but for sure, if you have access to the general unwrapping tool, especially for the face, it will save you a lot of time and will make your life easier. But we don't need those tools to achieve a good unwrap. Having them is always better, because it will accelerate your workflow. I'm not here to teach you the tool, but mostly to teach you the philosophy of unwrapping, if we could say. So once I'm done with the face, and this time I think I'm done, I figured that the shape of the horn island was pretty close to what I had with the unwrapped face. So it was a good time to re-weld those areas. So what I'm doing here is that I'm trying to find which point has to be welded with which one, and it really allows me to weld a lot of them. And then the cool thing is that I'm sure I won't have any seams or any weird stuff happening with the shading on the face of my character. And this is something I wasn't expected at all, so I was pretty happy that it ended up that well. So once I was able to reconnect the horn mostly on the head, I have pinned the different points that were merged and re-unwrap the horn, and then I had to rework its unwrapping because there was a lot of distortion. Blender wasn't able to solve it properly, but since it's a tubular shape, the horn is a pretty simple shape to understand, I could fix it by hand pretty easily. So I will finish this video here, and on the next video you'll be able to get the full unwrapping in a time-lapse. The only thing I want to add is the ultimate part is to rearrange your UVs. So I see a lot of UV map where people try to group the different parts, like they make all the asset together, they make part of the character together. In this case I want a single UV set, and I don't really care about having like all the skin parts on the side of the UV or whatever. What I want is to optimize the texel density. So the method to regroup your UV island is always to start with the biggest UV island, and then to add the smallest one to close the holes you may have in your UV map. That's it. Then I try to always keep them into a square. I try to arrange them into a square shape, and once I'm done I will increase the scale of all my island at once so that it fits the whole UV space as well as possible.